welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am here with author Georgia McVeigh. Usually I'll ask an author to introduce themselves and their book, but I am introducing you, Georgia, because we were just chatting before I hit record that this is your very first novel, Sorry for Your Loss. And congratulations. It is a crazy wild ride that you have taken us on. Without any further ado, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and in your own words, what is Sorry for Your Loss about?
Hello. Well, as I've just mentioned, my name is Georgia McVeigh. Sorry for Your Loss is my debut novel. Um, it tells the story of two magnetic people who meet at a local grief group. It's told from the point of view of Iris, who's intense, a little obsessive, and recently lost her boyfriend. When she meets Jack at the group, she's instantly taken in by him. He's charming, good looking, but more importantly, he lost his wife on the very same day that Iris lost her boyfriend. To Iris, it feels like fate, but as she becomes more and more enmeshed in Jack's world, she begins to realize that perhaps Jack is also keeping secrets. And it sets off a game of cat and mouse where it's never quite clear who is the predator and who is the prey.
Wow. Yeah, it really is. And one of the things I really enjoy about it is just sort of the idea of the pacing and how you find out what information when, which to me is like one of the best parts about a thriller is no matter whose point of view you're reading, the amount of information that they're willing to give you sets the pace of the book. And the thing about Iris is she gives you just enough information to, kind of put you in her shoes, but what she's missing, the parts that are vague are what needs to be filled in. And Jack, you see her kind of take him into her mind as this perfect I'm going to call him a mark. I mean, the thing is like when you're grieving, you're constantly looking for connection.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that, as somebody who lost my parents,
Oh,
I didn't do a grief counseling group myself, but I do know that there is sort of like this moment where you're just like, wow, it's really hard to find people who haven't been through this very specific thing to relate
yeah,
to. Um,
yeah.
so, there's sympathy in the beginning for Iris. As you mentioned, she is a little bit obsessive, uh, just a bit,
Yeah.
um,
Just a touch, yeah.
just a touch. But what you learn about her background and what you learn about Jack through her very casual internet, I'm not going to call it stalking, I'm going to call it research of him. It really sort of winds together in this crazy roller coaster that suddenly just goes down into a bunch of twists and turns. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it was a real quick read for me. Um, when you wrote this, what was the inception point exactly for you? Was it the grieving? Was it Iris specifically? Or was it
Yeah,
Jack?
I think it was definitely more around character for me. I work as an editor for a literary agency, and so I read very widely across all genres, and I've always been incredibly drawn to thrillers. I love to be surprised by a book. I love books that I can't predict, and I've always been very drawn to strong female characters. So I knew. Particularly, I think if there's a level of unreliability to them. So I knew that I wanted to start with the character. It was important to me that the character drove the plot forward rather than the plot driving the character forward. And I guess the inspiration for Iris um, came mainly from social media, I think. I've always been very interested in how social media has changed particular kind of social functions from online dating to just how we interact on a day-to-day basis. Um, and I think it's also changed the way we grieve, and it's taken something that was traditionally quite a private thing and turned it into quite a public thing. And actually, on the whole, I think it's a really lovely phenomenon. I think if you look on the Facebook page of someone who's died, this kind of outpouring of love towards that person almost provides kind of a forum where people can talk about, or almost talk directly to the person who's died. And so it's really lovely in that sense. But on the flip side of that, there's also these people who kind of exist on the outskirts, and maybe you'll see a post from them on someone's Facebook profile, and it will be laying claim to a relationship with the person who's died that maybe they don't have a right to. And you know that. And I think that's kind of how I started with Iris. It made me question what would what was driving someone like that? Was it this pathological need for attention, or was it potentially something a bit darker? Um, and so I think that was kind of the inspiration behind her character, but obviously the book couldn't just exist totally online. And so I thought of the grief group, and that there was something I think I kind of knew that maybe I touched on something that might work, because the minute I had the thought of putting someone who is so manipulative into a room of incredibly vulnerable people, it kind of made my skin crawl a bit. And I think that was the moment that I kind of felt like I touched on something. And I think there's a lot about the grief group that appeals to Iris. I think in a way, she feels her grief is maybe a bit larger than everyone else's. She feels as though she's almost got this monopoly on grief. And I think there's also, it kind of allows her to perform her grief in a way that maybe she wouldn't be able to in other circumstances. So yeah, that was my starting point. And then the plot kind of expanded from there, really.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, without giving too much away,
Mm.
you managed. I know I mentioned in the beginning, just the amount of information you gave from time to time was very well done. But you also managed to fit Jack's situation, and what he was sharing and what he was hiding in very well with Iris's story. I mean, the ebb and flow was really, really good. How long did it take you to knit the plot points together?
A really, really, really long time. I made a huge mistake in that I didn't plan the novel at all. And I think for a thriller, just being able to kind of have a rough plan is really important. And I think as I was writing, I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And Jack kind of, I knew I wanted a male kind of counterpart to be in there, but originally he was mainly there sort of just as the focus of Iris's obsession, and it was more you start to realize I kind of developed him a lot later. And it was only really once I reached the end of the first draft, which was probably a year after I started writing, that I that I finally sat down and actually wrote a plan, having got a first draft down. And it took me another 2 years after that to kind of knit everything together. So it was a long process. Yeah, a long and arduous process, definitely.
Some of the side characters are also just really interesting. And again, like I think, there's been this trend that I enjoy, but I don't think it's always necessary of dual point of view. I think personally that it worked better that it wasn't in this case, both Jack and Iris's point of view. Like I think not just with Iris and Jack interacting, but also just how Iris interacted with her mother and other people. I thought it was really good that it was specifically just her mind that we were in. Did you ever consider doing a dual point of view?
Um, I I played around a lot, but actually not really in terms of dual point of view. I think particularly when you're writing such an unreliable character, I think there's something quite special, maybe, or not special, but about kind of viewing the world solely as she views it. And I think that was quite important to me because I think there are points where Iris warps certain situations and maybe conflates them. And I think it was important from that perspective not to have another point of view so that you're kind of very centered with her and it allows for greater twists maybe to come in as the novel progresses. Yeah.
Did you have the ending in mind when you started the story?
Um, no, actually, I really liked the idea that there were these two characters who kind of potentially were as equally manipulative as the other. But I didn't have the ending in mind. I actually wasn't quite sure where it was all going to end up, and who was going to end up coming out on top. And actually, that definitely did come to me a bit later. Yeah, yeah. It's hard to talk about it without
I
without
know, I
without
know, I
giving
know.
too
It
much
really,
away. But
yeah,
yeah.
no, it really is. So what is it about thrillers that you think really connects with people? Because the genre is super, super hot, and I feel like it will always be.
Yeah. I think there has always been a huge appetite for thrillers, and I think you're right. I think there always will be. Ultimately, I personally, I think it probably comes down to control in a way. I think in our conversation just before we started recording this podcast, we were talking about how uncertain the world is, and I think there's something really appealing about fiction thrillers in particular because they provide a very clear structure. There's the victim, there's the villain, and then at the end, there is a kind of neat sense of resolution and sometimes justice. And I think in a very uncertain world, I think there's something really appealing about that. Yeah, I think it kind of all comes down to trying to control the narrative around us. It's part of the reason that I don't love true crime as much as some people do, because I think there's always a question over what because it is a reflection of real life. I think there's always a question on over whether the person that's kind of declaring their innocence is actually innocent, whereas with fiction you find out and and it's kind of trying to kind of add some structure to the world, I think.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with us.
Yeah, cool.
Are you going to be working on another book? Or are you letting this one settle for a bit?
I have been working on another book actually. Yeah, similar genre. And I'm finding the process a little bit easier than I did the first time in that I'm actually planning it this time. So, yeah, fingers crossed for it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. This was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My guest was,
Georgia McVeigh, thank you so much for having me.
and thank you for being with us. And we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.